The jail stood ominously at the edge of town, a dark fortress with towering iron doors that groaned in the wind. It was a place where sunlight seemed to fade away, replaced by the grayness that clung to the walls like a heavy shroud. Inside, the air was thick and stale, filled with the echoes of despair that reverberated through the narrow hallways. Inmates shuffled about their cells, shadows of their former selves. Each man had a story etched into his weary face, tales of missed opportunities and long-lost dreams. The iron bars were not just barriers. They were symbols of their fading hope. Days turned into weeks as they waited, wondering if freedom would ever greet them again. Gnawing on their thoughts, they painted pictures in their minds, of sunsets beyond the walls and lives they could have lived. But as reality cast its dull pallor, doubt lingered heavily. The promise of hope feasted in their hearts, but it was a fragile meal served while the hangman's shadow loomed nearer. In this grim setting, each inmate held tightly to what little hope remained. Amidst the prison's gloom, Deputy Harper was known for his clumsiness. On this particular day, chaos erupted when a fight broke out among the inmates during lunch. Shouting and banging filled the air as the deputy rushed to regain control, his heart racing with each echoing scream. In the midst of the commotion, he fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking in panic. As he tried to calm the ruckus, one of the keys slipped from his grasp. In a swift motion, it bounced off the floor and flew into his mouth instead of landing safely on the table. In disbelief, he swallowed it whole, a desperate act born of confusion and fear. The chaos slowly subsided, but a heavy silence fell over the room as the reality of the deputy's mistake began to settle. The key, the very object that locked and unlocked their fate, was now trapped inside a man who had sworn to keep them confined. Inmates exchanged bewildered glances, an unusual spark of hope igniting in their eyes. Perhaps, just perhaps, this mishap could be their chance for freedom. As days passed in the dim light of the jail, a heavy silence wrapped around the inmates, thickening their despair. The iron bars that once felt like mere obstacles now seemed like the very chains of their fate, binding them to a life of regret and sorrow. Each morning brought a routine of hopelessness, rising to the sound of clanking metal and distant echoes, counting down the hours until another day slipped away without change. Conversations among the men turned from dreams of freedom to discussions about survival. They spoke of their lives before imprisonment, the laughter shared with loved ones, the simple joys that now felt like distant memories. Their hearts grew heavier as they realized how quickly hope could fade. With every passing hour, it felt as if freedom was slipping through their fingers like sand. Yet, amid this growing despair, whispers began to circulate about Deputy Harper's blunder. Some inmates dared to dream once more, contemplating what it would mean if they could somehow retrieve that swallowed key. This flicker of hope ignited a spark within them, stirring a longing for freedom that refused to die completely, even in the darkest of places. In the dim corners of their cells, the inmates found solace in storytelling, weaving tales of their past lives to keep hope alive. Each man shared memories that painted vibrant pictures of laughter and love, transporting them momentarily away from the cold, gray walls. One inmate recounted summer days spent fishing with his father, the sun shining brightly on the water. Another spoke of dancing with his sister at her wedding, her joyous laughter ringing in his ears. These stories became lifelines, tying them to a world beyond imprisonment. As they talked, dreams of freedom blossomed like wildflowers in a barren desert. Some envisioned starting fresh in distant towns where no one knew their names, while others dreamed of reuniting with family and friends. The thought of holding loved ones again fueled their spirits, imagining the taste of freedom as sweet as honey. In this fragile atmosphere, hope flickered like a candle's flame, sometimes dim but never completely extinguished. The prospect of escape through Deputy Harper's blunder added fuel to their dreams, reminding them that even in darkness, possibilities could emerge from the most unexpected places. With the flicker of hope growing stronger, the inmates gathered in their cells to devise a plan for escape. They knew they had a rare opportunity now that the jailhouse key resided within Deputy Harper. As they huddled together, voices started to rise in quiet excitement, each man contributing ideas, no matter how wild they seemed. First, they discussed how to distract the deputy. Some suggested staging another fight to draw his attention away. Others proposed a more subtle approach, like pretending to be ill and needing help. As they brainstormed, their camaraderie deepened, and laughter scattered the gloom that had once enveloped them. The next focus was on how to retrieve the key. They agreed that once they had the deputy distracted, one of them would need to confront him. They concocted a plan to suggest a trip to the infirmary, a place where they could catch him off guard and search for that elusive key. As the sun began to set outside, painting the walls with shades of orange and purple, the inmates shared determined glances filled with resolve. They felt as if freedom was just within reach, waiting for them to claim it together. As the days wore on, the atmosphere in the jail grew thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on the inmates. The hangman's arrival loomed like a dark cloud, casting shadows over their fleeting hopes. Each tick of the clock echoed ominously, reminding them that time was running out. Whispers about the hangman's schedule spread like wildfire, igniting fear and anxiety among the prisoners. During mealtimes, conversations turned tense and frantic. Inmates exchanged worried glances, their earlier camaraderie strained under the pressure of impending doom. Arguments broke out over trivial matters as nerves frayed. Some men even questioned whether they could trust one another to follow through with their escape plan. In their cells, sleep eluded many as anxious thoughts consumed them. The prospect of facing the hangman filled their minds with dread, making every creak of metal sound like a death knell. Yet, amid this rising anxiety, the memory of Deputy Harper's mistake served as a flicker of hope. They knew they had to act soon, but with each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, and uncertainty threatened to unravel their fragile plans. The day the hangman arrived was shrouded in ominous clouds, casting a shadow over the jail that seemed to deepen the sense of dread among the inmates. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the hallways, each step resonating like a death knell in their ears. As he walked by, the hangman's presence filled the air with an unsettling finality, and whispers of despair swept through the cells. Inmates huddled together, their faces pale and drawn as they exchanged terrified glances. Panic surged within them, amplifying their urgency to escape. Each moment spent behind bars felt like a moment closer to their doom. The memories of laughter and freedom faded into distant echoes, replaced by haunting images of what awaited them if they failed. As the hangman set up his grim apparatus nearby, anxiety turned to desperation. They knew they had to act swiftly and execute their escape plan before it was too late. The hope ignited by Deputy Harper's mistake now felt like a flickering candle amid a storm, fragile yet vital. With their hearts racing and minds racing faster, they prepared for one last desperate push toward freedom. In the dim light of their cells, the inmates gathered once more, driven by the urgent need to retrieve the key swallowed by Deputy Harper. With desperation fueling their creativity, they began brainstorming quirky ideas, their laughter echoing oddly against the cold stone walls. One inmate suggested they create a fake emergency, perhaps a staged illness that would require the deputy's immediate attention elsewhere. Another proposed a wild idea. They might use some of the food from their meager meals to concoct a strange potion to get the deputy to cough up the key. They imagined making a foul-smelling mixture of old bread and spoiled fruit, which could be more effective in drawing out Harper's attention than anything else. As these plans unfolded, excitement blossomed amidst the fear. Each idea, no matter how ridiculous, felt like a step closer to freedom. They decided that one or two of them would need to confront the deputy directly, armed with their playful deception and swift movements. With their hearts racing and minds whirring, they prepared for the audacious task ahead, knowing that this was their best chance at escape before their time ran out. As the inmates huddled together, a bond began to form among them, surprising even the most hardened souls. They found common ground in their shared desperation and the audacity of their escape plan. Men who had once kept their distance now leaned on each other for support and encouragement, united by the hope of freedom. Two inmates, Marcus and Sam, struck up an unexpected friendship. Marcus, a quiet thinker, often had ideas tucked away that he hesitated to share. Sam, on the other hand, was more outgoing and enthusiastic, encouraging Marcus to voice his thoughts. This camaraderie blossomed as they worked side by side, refining their escape strategy and building one another's confidence. Other unlikely alliances formed as well. A former rival found himself working alongside someone he had clashed with in the past. Both realized that cooperation was more important than old grudges in their fight for survival. The harsh reality of jail life faded slightly as laughter and shared stories filled the air, instilling a sense of purpose in their lives. For the first time in a long while, they felt less like mere prisoners and more like a united force ready to seize their chance at freedom. The day of confrontation arrived with an electrifying tension that filled the air like a storm about to break. The inmates took their positions, hearts pounding in unison as they prepared to execute their plan. Marcus and Sam led the charge, exchanging determined nods as they surveyed the corridor for Deputy Harper's approach. As the deputy entered the area, oblivious to the brewing storm, the inmates sprang into action. They shouted for his attention, demanding to speak with him urgently. "Deputy Harper," Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. "We know about the key you swallowed." The deputy halted, confusion washing over his face as he faced a unified front of men who had once felt powerless behind bars. The tension was palpable. They were no longer just prisoners, but a force driven by hope and desperation. With fierce resolve, they laid out their demands and revealed their plan for escape, standing together against the fear that had paralyzed them for so long. The moment was crucial. It would determine not only their fates but also whether they could seize control over their own lives once again. Deputy Harper stood before the inmates, his heart racing as he grappled with the weight of their demands. The sight of their fervent eyes, filled with desperation and hope, stirred something within him. He knew that helping them escape would defy his duties, but the thought of being complicit in their suffering tugged at his conscience. He felt the burden of responsibility pressing down on him, knowing that his actions could lead to chaos in the jail and consequences for himself. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that these men were not mere criminals. They were individuals with dreams and families waiting for them outside these walls. As he weighed his options, memories of their stories echoed in his mind. The laughter, the love lost, the dreams deferred. The deputy glanced at the iron bars that had kept them confined and considered how a single moment could change everything. Should he uphold the law or allow compassion to guide him? With a deep breath, he realized this decision would not only define his character, but could also ignite a spark of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. The moment had finally arrived, and chaos erupted as the inmates set their escape plan into action. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they executed their ruse with a mix of urgency and excitement. As they shouted for Deputy Harper, pretending one of them had collapsed from an illness, the deputy rushed over, concern written all over his face. In the confusion, Marcus and Sam signaled to the others. They knew they only had a fleeting moment before the deputy would realize the truth. As the deputy bent down to check on the sick inmate, several men made their move, rushing to distract him further. Laughter mingled with shouts, a cacophony meant to confuse and mislead. But obstacles arose quickly. Harper's partner entered the scene just as Marcus reached into the deputy's pocket, searching desperately for the key. A collective gasp filled the air when Harper turned to see what was happening. The inmates' hearts pounded as they realized they had little time left. With courage bolstered by desperation, they pressed forward in a chaotic surge, ready to tackle whatever came next in their quest for freedom. The aftermath of the escape attempt was chaotic. Deputy Harper's partner, witnessing the unrest, quickly apprehended both the deputy and the inmates, leading to an immediate lockdown. The facility buzzed with tension as alarms blared and guards rushed to restore order. Harper faced fierce reprimands for his earlier blunder. Questioning his competence weighed heavily on him as he struggled with guilt for the chaos that had erupted. Meanwhile, the inmates were thrown back into their cells, their fleeting hope deflated as they contended with the harsh consequences of their actions. Shackled by isolation once more, a sense of despair washed over them, seemingly quashing their dreams of freedom. Yet amidst this gloom, whispers of resilience lingered. Some inmates exchanged thoughts about trying again, their spirits unyielding despite harsh critiques from others who felt broken by the failed attempt. Their spirits might have been temporarily crushed, but seeds of rebellion were planted deep within their hearts. Even in defeat, the bonds formed during this shared endeavor created a flickering flame of hope, reminding them that no matter how dire things appeared, their fight for freedom was far from over. In the quiet aftermath of their failed escape, the inmates reflected on the tumultuous journey they had endured. Each man's heart bore the weight of dreams deferred and the haunting specter of freedom, yet an undeniable spark of resilience flickered within them. They realized that hope was not merely a fleeting notion to grasp during moments of light, but a steadfast companion in the darkest hours. Deputy Harper, too, engaged in introspection. His conscience wrestled with guilt and fear, yet a new understanding blossomed. He recognized that true courage lay not just in duty, but in acknowledging human connections, even in the unlikeliest places. As future discussions swirled around their next moves and potential ways to reclaim their liberty, one thing became clear. Facing their fate required both audacity and vulnerability. The hangman might loom near, but their spirits would not falter. With every setback came a chance to rise anew. Together, they learned that even behind iron bars, one can cultivate the seeds of hope. And sometimes, it's through these shared struggles that true freedom is born within.